What signs warn you that you should end a friendship? Story 1. If you notice that you're constantly feeling judged or criticized rather than supported and encouraged, it might be a sign that the friendship is doing more harm than good. Story 2. When every interaction feels like you're a guest star on their personal drama series and you're always cast as the villain, it's time to cancel that subscription when being around them feels more exhausting than binge-watching a bad TV show. Story 3. When seeing them becomes something you put off because it feels like a chore, or you get a sinking feeling when you see a message come in from them. When it is no longer a reciprocal friendship, but you find yourself called to their side in emergencies, but they won't do the same for you. Story 4. These are the biggies for me. You are always the one reaching out. They only call you if they want something from you. When you spend time with them, it's a one-sided conversation about what's going on in their lives, what their problems are, what they need or want, etc. They never ask questions about your life or offer you any kind of support. Treating you as an afterthought, they reach out to you or commit to plans with you only when there's nothing better. Thankfully, the older you get, the easier it is to see these people for what they are and get them out of your life. As far as friends go, quality is far better than quantity. Story 5. In my experience, as an adult, the little things that snuck up on me were not wanting to share things with them because I wasn't sure how judgy they'd be, resentment over little slights that built up until I actually noticed it, reflected in it, and recognized it as resentment, realizing they were rapidly making new friends who were 1000% not my kind of people, recognizing mean behavior for mean behavior, whether they're doing it on purpose or not, realizing they'd never protect my privacy and reputation the way I would protect theirs. In other words, sharing my personal information as gossip with people I wouldn't share it with, speaking more from my school-age friendships, feeling like a tag-along/last person to be asked, being talked over, feeling unseen for who I actually was. I realized as I got older that a lot of my school friends were really just a result of, I'm shy, so I hang out with whoever felt comfortable. But those people had little in common with me and probably wouldn't have missed me much if I'd gone my own way. They had big, loud personalities. I didn't, and I got drowned out. Story 6. In my view, the sign of a toxic friend is someone who does not reciprocate. They are what you would consider a leech. You may share money, advice, love, and many other things with them, but they'll hardly ever share anything positive back with you. It is usually just negative stuff. I usually step back and not share anymore when I notice their pattern of behavior. I don't drown in their negativity. Instead, I show them in my distancing action where they stand with me. I don't do them any favors at all when they ask. Usually they'll look for someone else to prey on. Story 7. If a friendship feels more like a chore than a joy, where every conversation feels like you're walking on eggshells or you're always the one reaching out, it might be time to hit the eject button. If you're constantly feeling worse after spending time together rather than better, that's a pretty clear sign. Story 8. My best friend of 30 years has a well-known history of grossly overreacting to very minor problems, to the point where you tell her how to solve the problem, but rather than listening, she calls you all day long for days on end for you to tell her the same thing and reassure her. It's super annoying at times, but since I'm a good friend, I always just go through the motions to reassure her. Then she doesn't listen and regrets not listening, but it is what it is. This isn't a once-in-a-blue-moon thing. It's like a few times a month thing. It's always something she's making out of nothing. Then her anxiety and ADHD kick in, and she spirals, literally over non-issues. This happened again recently. She had an issue with a neighbor because of her dog. Her neighbor was completely in the wrong, but she had herself convinced that animal control would come take her dog. To be clear, the neighbor was calling animal control just to be a nuisance, and doing it daily for weeks. Animal control was aware he was being petty, but still had to come out every time. They even reassured her that her dog barking for a few minutes when it was let out to use the bathroom would never result in them taking her dig. But she couldn't let it go and started blowing up my phone, freaking out on a Friday night. I'm a chef, and Friday dinner rush is balls to the wall. I didn't have time to step outside and talk to her for an hour about it for the millionth time. So I talked to her for a few minutes and reminded her what animal control said, and let her know I had to get back on the line, and I would call her when I got off. Immediately after hanging up, she sent me a text that said, "Thanks for being a shitty friend." That was my breaking point. In 30 years, through her various traumas and addictions, I was the only person, her family included, who was always there for her and never gave up on her. In 30 years, even when she has completely been in the wrong and over the line, she has never once said, "I'm sorry." Unless those words come out of her mouth, I'm never talking to her again, because this isn't the first time she said that over a non-issue that had absolutely nothing to do with me. That was a month ago as of last Friday. I'm not just going to be a doormat anymore because she can't get her emotions in check. Story 9. My friend was a pathological liar about the dumbest shit. For over a decade, I just dealt with it, ignored him when he was talking his nonsense. But then he started making up stories about hooking up with this girl. Extremely graphic stuff, and she heard about it and he got called out. It was pretty much the end of our friendship. Story 10. The moment you realize each time they come to you with something wrong you did, you're quick to see their hurt and apologize and fix the issue, because no disagreement is more important than them to you. But when the roles are reversed, they get defensive and do mental gymnastics and bend over backwards to justify why they did what they did, even presenting evidence that they've been holding on to, like a pre-planned gotcha moment. This is a person who likes what you do for them, but they don't value you as a person. Time to go ASAP. And he prepare for them to tell people you stop talking to them suddenly and they have no idea why, and that you're insane, El Mao. Story 11. They don't respect boundaries, as in you say you don't want to do something, and they try to pressure, guilt, or manipulate you into doing it anyway. Case in point, my now ex-friend who constantly seemed to find ways to force me into bars even when I made it clear I don't like that environment. Far from her only crime, but it was a symptom of a much larger problem. Quoth my counselor, your friends don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. Story 12. You know what's a real red flag? When someone wrongs you, stands you up for a lunch date, caught bad-mouthing you, embarrassed you, etc. Seems to have the decency at least to apologize, but then suddenly they call the shots on closing the case and moving on. Such as, yeah, I'm really sorry about that. Anyway, we've wrapped that up and we'll just move on with our lives, right? Without your getting a word in edgewise that you've actually accepted the apology. Run, don't walk away from those people. I have. Story 13. As someone who doesn't notice and or ignores negativity until it gets out of hand, and sometimes even after that, I'd say even just dreading hanging out with the person. Even if you can't think of a legit reason for it, feeling that dread should be a sign. I ended a long-standing friendship a few years ago. I spent ages ignoring the rising dread, but eventually everything came to a head, and I realized that this wasn't a person I wanted in my life anymore. Could have saved myself a lot of trouble if I just faded out before that point. Story 14. If they only hang with you because they're lonely or need something and not because you actually like each other. Or if they only want to get drunk high and never do anything healthy. I'm currently dealing with this with both friends and family members. It sucks that I have to distance myself from them, but it needs to happen if I'm ever going to improve my life. Story 15. When they take a difference in opinion as a personal attack, when they attempt to take their frustration out on you, when they're jealous of you for any reason, when they bad-mouth you to others, when they treat you differently than others, when you realize that if someone else with less history treated you like that, you'd cut them off immediately. Story 16. Friendships are meant to be mutually beneficial. If a person is not contributing positively to your life, then ask yourself why they are there. This isn't to say if a friend is in a rough patch and isn't capable of reciprocating for a while that you shouldn't show them grace. But just keep in mind that the grace should go both ways and shouldn't be a permanent change to the dynamic. Story 17. When you constantly have to justify yourself. When you feel like you are constantly apologizing for your behavior. When they are always complaining. When you just don't feel happy being around them anymore. When you feel like every time you meet them, talk to them, or be around them, your energy just drains afterwards. Story 18. I cut a friend off slowly because she rang me every Sunday evening at 7. If I didn't answer, she would drive 25 minutes to my house. She always said you looked tired and tried to feel my forehead when she saw me. I stopped answering the phone and went out when I knew she would arrive. I felt a bit sorry for her but couldn't cope with her weird behavior. She gave up trying in the end. Story 19. Treating you differently when other people are around. Specifically as a guy, if a friend acts different towards me when girls are around, or like tries to make himself stand out by stepping on his other friends because he has nothing else. That's it for me. A real friend also messes with you and expects it back at them, but it's like very clear it's not a serious dig, and at the same time builds you up to other people. I don't have time to be around someone walking on eggshells and have them minimizing anything you're proud of. Story 20. When it comes to ending a friendship, there are several signs that might indicate it's time to move on. One major red flag is consistent negativity. If every interaction leaves you feeling drained or down, the friendship may no longer be a positive force in your life. Another indicator is a lack of support. If they're never there for you during difficult times or seem to only focus on their own needs, it could signal an imbalance in the relationship. Constant drama can also be a warning sign. If your friend is always embroiled in unnecessary conflict or creating chaos, it can become too exhausting to manage. Persistent disrespect is another clear signal. If you've tried to address issues and they continue to disrespect or dismiss you, it may be time to reconsider the friendship. Lastly, if there's a noticeable inconsistency in effort, where you're always the one reaching out and making plans without much reciprocation, it could suggest that the friendship is no longer mutual. Story 21. Any friend that just cannot help themselves but will always run to you for advice they won't take. Constantly complaining about a weird guy texting them, will continue to text him back and refuse to block him because that's mean. Tells you they haven't eaten all day. You tell them they should because you're going out for drinks. She doesn't listen, gets plastered, and you end up responsible for getting your blackout drunk friend home late at night in the city. Tells you about her boyfriend's shitty/shady behavior. You tell her it's toxic and she should end it, and she agrees. She won't, but she'll let you know about every increasingly awful thing that happens. I had a friend who'd always get herself into these bad situations, ending up at trap houses, going to stay with shady dudes she met online out of town, etc. She'd often text me if things felt sketchy, which would worry me, and then ghost me until the next day because she fell asleep/forgot. Eventually I was worried enough, and her situation, I told her to hang tight because I was going to call the police. She responded real quick, and I decided that was my breaking point. Story 22. When they think your no really means convince me. I had a friend that was very much more social than I was, and every time we hung out, she'd want to go to the next thing. And the next. For example, that was a great movie. Where do you want to go to eat? Or do you want to grab something and head back to my house? Anytime I would say I wanted to go home, she would start trying to convince me that I wanted to stay. Sometimes she would even beg, and she always drove, so I ended up feeling like a hostage. As an adult, I understand this probably meant something was not right at home. But no, always and forever means no. Story 23. They are only there for the drama. I have had so many friends that are there for me when I have something dramatic or interesting, spilling the tea, worthy, and then they're never there to help me out of whatever situation it is, or they don't want to actually hang out with me. Case in point, I just dropped a person whom I thought was my best friend. Today, I am going through a really hard divorce, and I still live with him. She lives right next door. She has not made any attempt to converse with me in months. We were hanging out pretty much daily before the drama, and then right when I found out about my husband's 5-year affair, she wanted to know every single detail. We were, I thought, super close. We went on a 15-hour trip together to get her kids from her ex-husband. It was all around a great trip. She was. I thought a person that was going to be there for me for a good long time, and once all the drama became commonplace between me and my husband, now she doesn't answer my texts. Now she doesn't answer phone calls. Now she doesn't talk to me when she sees me in the yard. She's there for the drama for sure. She's just not there to talk to me or to support me. Story 24. Apathy. So much goddamned apathy. There was a post a couple weeks ago about how most people underestimate how much other people enjoy their company. All I could think is how terribly inaccurate that is for me. I knew precisely how little of a fuck my friend group gave about me. I had started to get really fatigued from their apathetic vibes, not just toward me, but each other and themselves. A lot of self-loathing and self-pity. So I ghosted them all one day, and not a single one said anything to me about it. Never heard from them again. That was 2008. Story 25. When their words don't match their actions when it comes to putting effort into the friendship. Example I've dealt with. Had a friend who'd always give compliments, saying that we should hang out more, and genuinely a good person to be around. Deciding I'd follow through with this advice, I invited her to hang out about 3 times this summer. She was too busy one week, honestly not a big deal at all. Then the second time she flaked without planning a reschedule. Then lastly, she just never replied. I was always initiating these, and for reference, it's not like I was blowing up her phone. We texted maybe once every 10 days. Story 26. I had a close friend for more than 15 years. We did everything together, work, travel, sports, holidays. Since 2 or 3 years, he completely changed after getting a promotion in a big company, started refuting all his core values, faith, cheating on his wife with one of the juniors at work that is clearly using him for her career, etc. Recently, I even had a surgery and stayed in the hospital for a week. He didn't show up, calling last minute to say he was busy bringing his kids to some activities and that the hospital was already closed for visitors, etc. Now I just wish him good life. The rest is past. Story 27. A couple where one of their personalities change when the other half is not around. Also people who do not help themselves. These are 2 big red flags. Story below. Trigger warning, abusive controlling partners. My wife and I moved cross-country and have been looking for friends and got to know the neighbors. This story happened recently, so it's still a bit of a fresh wound for us. A couple that my wife and I enjoyed spending time with and have over almost daily were quickly becoming our new best friends. Something seemed off about the way they interacted with each other. We've been through some rough patches ourselves, so we tend to observe and not to judge. The man is always happy-go-lucky, life of the party type. The woman was always a bit more reserved and always wanted to be in the same room as him. It seemed a bit clingy but affectionate. They squabble regularly, but it's never too bad. One day she comes over while he's out, and her personality is completely shifted. She's actually very vocal and vented about how he's always accusing her of sleeping with other men any chance he can get, despite being the one that sleeps around. So she monitors who and how she is allowed to talk to. We strongly tried convincing her to leave him, but she insisted on staying out of love despite all of our small mutual friend group recognizing how miserable she is. Fast forward a week or so, I've been slowly encouraging him to feel and express his love in more positive ways because when she's not in the room, he always talks about how she is the best thing to ever happen to him and how fortunate he feels, so I thought maybe they have a chance to turn it around. I was getting some work done in the front yard with his help. As we went through our gate to the backyard, she was sitting enjoying a cigarette. He started poking her buttons, and she asked him to leave her alone so she could relax. That made him start getting louder, so I told him to leave through the gate and cool off for a few minutes because he knew that yelling was strictly forbidden in my home. I went inside to grab some drinks for everybody. While I was away, he came back through the gate and was screaming at her while she was saying he just wanted to be left alone. He ended up spitting on her and calling her a whore, so I kicked my door open and told him to get the fuck off my property. I would never have guessed he was capable of treating her like that. I started asking around a little more, and there's a long history of this, and this was actually a very small fight compared to most. Then we heard a few stories of events too dark for me to write here. He almost broke it off and started talking about how he's going over to his affair partners and started calling any woman's number he had. I thought it would really be the time that they'd be done. We offered our home to her, and she was fully on board with moving on. I do not know if it's the years of being wore down or fear of retaliation, but by the evening, she left to go follow him around while he ranted and raged. They're still together. This has been a grim reminder that you don't know people behind closed doors. We never thought he'd be capable of this or that she would just let it happen. I have dealt with two-faced people before, but never to this extent. We feel betrayed and disappointed. The neighborhood doesn't feel as cozy and safe. Story 28. I blame myself on being young and not seeing signs with some friends. One went overseas, granted you don't of course stay in touch as much, but I'd write her a good page-long email about life and she'd reply with a few words reply, okay, she's just busy. She'd leave all my FB messages on read, again thought she was busy, but she was on trains too. 3 hours a day commuting and said she loved that time to catch up on messages. I guess not to me. Next straw came when she put a post up that she was coming back home for a few weeks. I was wrapped time for a girls' night out. She said she'd get in touch. Nothing. I did, however, see a photo of her and about 4 other of my friends on FB saying, good to catch up with the girls, my invite must have got forgotten. I text her, was I not invited? Her reply, no. I stupidly asked if she wanted to do a coffee while she was here. Her reply was, yay, maybe, but I'd only be able to do 15 mins. I told her not to worry and never heard from her again. Should have taken the hint she never wanted to stay in touch with me. When people want to make an effort, they will.